Let's rewind all the way back to 2008. TF2 was less than a year old, I myself had been playing the game for a couple of months, and a friend of mine, who had been playing the game a bit longer than I had, tells me one day that I need to start playing games in a real server. And he shows me one of these servers, a place called specialattack.net. It was a revelation. I had never been so stopped in my whole life, and I absolutely loved it. I was on there every other night of the week, playing with the other server regulars. I was on the community forums, I was in their Mumble server. It was just brilliant. It was a fantastic place to go, and I'm still kicking around there today. Now of course you could put a lot of that sense of wonderment and enjoyment down to the game itself still being very new and exciting. But, and this is putting a 15-minute video into a nutshell, which is a dangerous thing, so please do stick around so I can tell you the whole story. The Valve servers and the Quickplay system we use today mean that you just don't get that kind of community forming anymore, nothing like you did back then anyway, and I think the TF2 experience suffers greatly from it. I know from speaking to a lot of people who were involved in communities like Special Attack, they have pretty similar feelings on the subject. We load up TF2, we hit the Quickplay button, and we're often a bit disappointed by what we find. And what's even sadder is that by the looks of things, a lot of these old community servers, places like Special Attack, either they're gone or they're nowhere near as active as they used to be. What's worse than that, actually, is that the Quickplay system itself did huge damage to the old style servers around which communities would gather and form. So this video is about, it's about a lot of things actually. It's about the community servers themselves, it's about Quickplay servers, maybe more to the point, the Quickplay system itself, and it's about how TF2, quite remarkably, transitioned from relying entirely on community servers supporting the player base to the system we have today, where we have just about everyone playing on Valve servers and a fairly small handful of Quickplay servers. And, without putting on the rose-tinted glasses, about how somewhere during that process we lost a very important part of what makes playing not just TF2, but any online game such a great experience. Special Attack was, basically still is, a gaming community, and they ran a couple of TF2 servers under the Special Attack name. In Special Attack's case, the guys who set it all up actually owned the hardware that the server was run on, and they rented out a space at a data centre somewhere in the Netherlands to connect it to. Those guys, they made the server rules, they decided who the server admins were, they could configure the server, install different mods and plugins on it however they liked. It was, at the end of the day, their server, not Valve's server, like a lot of the servers you'll play on today are. They also ran a website, a forum, a Mumble channel and a couple of other games on their hardware, so when I talk about a community server, Special Attack's a good example of one. A server run by part of a game's community rather than the developers themselves. My first impression of the Special Attack server, or just SPA for short, was that it kicked ass. In more ways than one, yes, it was a great place to play, absolutely loved it there. And it was also a really difficult place to play. I'd went from an all-talk server, which to be fair did have a really pleasant community, to one of the places that people went to specifically because they knew it was regularly full of people who were really good at TF2. I mean, people who were still, considering that the game was fairly new then, seriously good at TF2. Probably the most famous and also the most extreme example of a really good SPA regular would be Cookie, as in the same Cookie who was one of the best scouts in Europe's competitive scene for a good long time. Now I don't want to make out to you that SPA was full of players of that calibre, but we did have a good mix of people who played the game competitively on the server. I mean, some of you might actually recognise the Special Attack name from one of the old war teams. Basically this was definitely from the time before the competitive and public sides of the TF2 scene were as strongly segregated as they are today. So like I say, obviously not everyone in the server was that good, but even just being in that environment, playing with and against people who were on this whole other level, it demanded that everyone's performance was lifted up. More to the point, it demanded and encouraged teamwork. And where you've got teamwork, and you've got the same people playing in the same place, day in, day out, that's when you've got a community starting to build. So yeah, SPA was a great place to go and get your ass kicked. More importantly, it was just a great place to go, period. And this is the community server experience that you're going to know what I'm talking about if you've ever been a part of it. You get to know what other people's favourite classes are. You start to recognise people by the habits they have in game, or even just like the hats that they wear, and you start to know that, oh right, this guy's in the other team, I know who he is. That means they're going to have a really good like sniper or spy, and that's going to make life really hard for us. So you get to know these guys, you start hanging out with them on the forums as well, and in Mumble, during the game, after the game. You start adding these guys in Steam, you play with them all the time in your friends list, and before you know it, you're getting to know all these people that you would never have met before, and you're becoming friends with a lot of them, in-game and out. Now that is the value of a good community server. Special Attack is where I discovered the best part about playing games online isn't the game itself, but it's the people that you play it with. Now let's jump forward a few years to when Valve started to implement the Quickplay option into TF2. The idea was that you'd hit the Quickplay button, select the game mode you wanted to play, and you'd be sent to a good quality server. The benefits of this were obvious. It was really convenient, it was a way for new players to find a decent place to play, whether that was a Valve server or whether that was one of what must have been hundreds of good community servers that still had active and healthy communities, and not end up somewhere with, for example, pay-to-win features or other unwanted mods. So under Quickplay, it sounded like everyone would win. It sounds like good news for what, for the sake of shorthand, I'm going to call for the good community servers. We'd started to see these awful premium instant respawn video adverts you can't mute servers that nobody really wanted to see new players end up in. In some ways, everything I've just said about Quickplay, what it was supposed to do, that's true, Quickplay did have that effect. But, despite this, and I know that this is going to be old news to a lot of people, I actually think that Quickplay has in many ways damaged the game. It was certainly the biggest change that Valve ever made to the game. The impact of Quickplay has been bigger than any balance change, any new unlock, any new map, any new game mode, anything. And it may have been a necessary change to secure the game's future, but I can't honestly say it's been a change for the better. By funneling new players into what was deemed to be safe servers, Quickplay has done irreversible damage to what must be hundreds of good community servers. So what went wrong? First of all, and this is a bit of a generalisation, but from talking to people from other servers, this is more or less what happened in most cases. Community servers just did not get much traffic from Quickplay. All around we saw a significant drop in player traffic after Quickplay was introduced. What used to happen is that new players would launch the game, open up the server browser and take their pick. Now some of the servers available to them were awful, we know that, but whether by seeking them out on the internet or just by asking a friend or just finding them, they would eventually come across a server that appealed to them and they would stick around in that community. And that's how communities would grow and continue to grow. Now they didn't do that. All that new players had to do was hit the Quickplay button and they would end up, if they were lucky, in a Valve server playing TF2. Now that's if they were lucky. In a lot of cases, they'd actually end up in one of the terrible servers that Quickplay was supposed to kill off. There were months, and I don't know exact details, but I think it was about a year or so, that Quickplay would be sending people to the premium servers. You know, the cesspool ones. Even nowadays, it can still send you to some kinda questionable places. It's not the worst thing in the world, but I have recently been sent to some like instant respawn servers. The problem was way worse back then. Either way, they weren't coming to the community servers anymore. Now, you might be saying, and this might be the case particularly if you're new to the game, what's the problem with Valve servers? And here's the thing, they do their job. You can go in them, you won't be subjected to ads and premium benefits and all that nonsense. You can play a game of TF2 more or less how it was intended to be played. But for me, and as far as I can tell for most people who used to be regulars in the old community servers, we can see the problem, and the problem is Valve servers kinda suck. Now that needs some explanation. What it comes down to is that they're lifeless. There were two main attractions of Special Attack and other good community servers: the challenge and the community. The truth is, Valve servers don't really have either of those things, or at least definitely nowhere near the degree that community servers did. And I think that that's because it's not an environment that breeds those things. Let's talk about the challenge first. Now, there have always been new players, there have always been, well, noobs, but if all you've known about the game are Valve servers, these places specifically designed to hoover up new players like yourself and your perception of the game, of whatever players are capable of whatever you believe to be reasonable and possible to perform in the game is limited because you've just never been exposed to a special attack environment. You've just never had somebody, people like Cookie, people like, I remember Minimus is one of the old guys, people who are just like really good at the game, regularly come along and shit on you from a great height. You're gonna think that anyone who turns up on a Valve server who is significantly more skillful than yourself is likely to be an anomaly, or who's this random guy, or he must be a hacker or something. And of course I'm at the risk of sounding elitist when I say stuff like this, but really go into your average Valve server and I suspect the skill level is not going to be very high, and it's almost never appreciably going to get any higher. So why does this matter? It matters because it's uninspiring. I remember being in Spa and just being awed that the people around me were this good at the game, and it made me want to invest more time in the game, to learn everything I could about it, and basically just to stick around. And that's a big part of why I'm still playing TF2 like 8 years later. Maybe I'm just really out of touch with what new players see in the game, but I really can't imagine the sort of gameplay you see in a Valve server continue to be inspiring once things like the game's funky aesthetics and the appealing characters, yeah, they're still appealing, but they start to become familiar and not so immediately impressive. And after that, it's a question of what's going to make you stick around with this game. Second, and I think this is the more important point, a Quickplay server does almost nothing to build a community. You get shipped off to a random server, you play for an hour or so, rarely will that be enough time to form a connection with someone in that game. And in all likelihood, you'll never see anyone in that server again. It's nothing like the community servers, where you'd be playing with the same kind of regulars all the time. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Outside of that small window of immediate contact, you are, basically, anonymous. And that's what Quickplay does, it anonymizes the game. Now, that's convenient if you just want to dip in and to dip out, but it means that community, that element that in long term is the most important thing that keeps people coming back to the game, is basically not there. Not in any meaningful sense, anyway. Now, I can understand from Valve's perspective why promoting Quickplay in Valve-owned servers makes sense, because it gives them control over the game. From their perspective, the more they can do to minimise Johnny McNew player wandering into 24/7 trade server, have no idea what's going on, and think to himself, this game is terrible, I'm never going to play anything made by Valve ever again, the better. Ideally, they want virtually everyone playing TF2 on as vanilla a server as possible, 32 players, and in this you can argue that they did eventually succeed. On top of that, we've seen plenty of other games use either developer-hosted Quickplay style servers, or pretty much since the descendants of, I'd say, about League of Legends, an appetite for matchmaking in games. League, CSGO, most recently Overwatch, a lot of developers in games are choosing a system that takes the servers away from players and into the control of the developers. And in what I think is, I suppose, a more focused model, I would describe it, of what Quickplay does, it puts players into situations where, unless they're playing with friends already, they team up with a limited amount of time, rarely enough to establish any kind of meaningful connection, before everyone disappears from that team into anonymity again. Now, that's not to say that communities don't form and exist within these games, of course they do, but the focus of them is very much different. How many times have you been playing with some friends in, let's say, Overwatch or League, and you've started bitching about the randoms on your team, the people who make up the rest of your team that aren't hanging out in your Mumble channel? I bet that's going to sound quite familiar for a lot of you. Even on your own team, from what I've seen from systems like Matchmaking and Quickplay, they tend towards much smaller groups, and groups with an us versus them attitude. Whereas in the old community servers, you probably end up seeing these so-called randoms actually just about every other night of the week, and you play with them, and you play against them, and now this random guy, he's not just a random, he's someone that you know and you have fun playing with. I mean, I'm a competitive gamer and I do see the benefits of matchmaking in terms of promoting the competitive environment, but there is so much to be said for that community environment, which was just as much about playing with a server full of just good fucking guys, rather than purely winning. So, Of course, we've got Matchmaking for TF2 coming around the corner. It's kind of here already, but it's still in beta and there are a lot of problems with it. And I get the feeling that everyone involved was hoping it would be live by now. But anyway, does that mean I think matchmaking is going to be a bad thing for TF2? You know, I can't say that I do. It's probably going to be great for the game, at the very least for renewing the interest of older players for at least a little bit. And that's the thing, I suspect that a lot of these guys will gravitate specifically towards matchmaking rather than community servers. Not all of them. I wouldn't be surprised if the community servers do see a bump in activity, just like whenever any big update is released. But those are only ever temporary bumps. And in recent years that period of interest has gotten shorter and shorter. So to answer the question, I'm probably going to enjoy matchmaking when it does come along, eventually. But I don't really expect it to be a huge revival for community servers that for a while now have been inactive or nearly dead, basically. Of course, it's not the end of community servers in all games ever. There are still plenty of games, whether by choice or by necessity, that rely on the community to provide servers to play on. But in the most played, biggest multiplayer titles, you can see the benefits to the developer of maintaining that control. We know which way the wind is blowing, basically. And I do think that's a shame. If there's a point to this video, other than just remembering how, in my opinion, important community servers were, it's to say that maybe this trend toward putting matchmaking and quickplay into absolutely everything for the sake of convenience and for competitive, it's not always strictly a good thing. I think that approach diminishes what's probably the most important part of playing games online, and that's about playing with people, not just a couple of friends, but finding that wider bond with gamers. Special Tax is special, place to me, and I think that community server experience, it's an important one. I really do. I've had a wonderful time in SPA over the years, and more importantly, even though the TF2 side of it, like sadly just about every other community server these days, isn't really active, other than when we decide to have a game night for the fun of it, Special Tax still going. I mean, we're still gaming together. Later on this year, we're having another meetup, and I won't be going to this one, but this one's to celebrate 10 years. 10 years of the community existing. I wasn't around for those whole 10 years, but I've still had a blast with these guys. And I think the same could be said for a lot of people who've been part of these communities. I mean, yeah, Quickplay sucked. And I mean, even if Quickplay hadn't happened, TF2's been around for almost 9 years now. I mean, people get married, change jobs, move to different parts of the world. All kinds of stuff happen in that space of time. And to be honest, maintaining an interest in a particular video game and or internal community drama happening or not happening, it's not the biggest deal in the grand scheme of things, right? So of course community servers, they're going to come and they're going to go anyway, but more important than that, I mean, we're still here, we're still playing games together, we're still hanging out, we're still kicking, and at the end of the day, that's the important bit. So I'm not saying that this video is a RIP community servers video. I mean, that is kind of the situation for TF2 in Europe anyway, but I think what's more important is to recognise that these were important, even formative, places for a lot of us. And while community servers as a mechanism for hosting games will probably never go away, I kind of suspect that the golden age of them is coming to an end, or at least that's certainly been the case in TF2 for a while now. But I think it would be wrong to quote unquote mourn this situation, because I think that in most cases the communities themselves, the actual connections people made, that never really died. So rather, I like to give a shout out to the old communities of European TF2. There's absolutely loads of them, and honestly it would be disingenuous to pretend that I knew or remember even a fraction of them, but the ones that I know I at least visited or had some sort of connection with over the years include Localin, Lethal Zone, Clan Crazy, Grumpy Old Gits, TGH, Slackfestion, German Headquarters, the Hampshire Heavies, and, of course, Special Attack. To everyone involved with those guys, or with any other TF2 community, looking back on it, I think we were part of something special. Your servers may be offline, or just don't see the traffic that they used to, but hopefully the friendships you've made are still there today. So here's to the good times. I'll catch you later.